I never expected the sharpest sting would come from someone smiling over pastel cupcakes and pink ribbons. When your husband's mother calls you a gold digger in front of everyone you know, what's left to say, except what happens next? Before I share what happened next, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. It's strange how quiet a room can feel, even when it's filled with laughter. That Saturday, my living room was dressed up like a Pinterest board, sunlit windows, helium balloons that bobbed when the air conditioner kicked on, and tiny pink shoes strung on twine like a baby's version of Christmas lights. I was supposed to be the center of attention, and in some ways I was, but not for the reasons you'd hope. My mother-in-law, Marianne, had been helping all morning. She moved like a parade host, never sitting, always adjusting a vase or fluffing a pillow. If I touched the napkins, she'd smooth them after me. If I carried a tray of cupcakes, she'd swoop in, recentering each one like it might run off the plate if I wasn't careful. The women from church, the neighbors, and even my own mom gave her a wide berth. Everyone knew Marianne, even if they pretended not to. Her compliments always sounded like warnings. I tried to focus on what mattered. I was 6 months pregnant, my feet ached, and my husband, Daniel, was supposed to be home in an hour. If I was honest, the hope of seeing him, my anchor, my reason, was the only thing making this afternoon survivable. The doorbell kept ringing. Each new arrival came with a cloud of perfume and a hug that pressed too tight. Everyone had opinions about the due date, about baby names, about how tired I looked. "Just wait until the baby's here," someone teased, and I smiled. You learn to let small comments float by like leaves in a stream. It was just after 1 o'clock when I heard Marianne's voice rise above the chatter. She was talking about how she decorated Daniel's nursery when he was born. Real wood crib, none of this plastic stuff, and suddenly, all eyes landed on me. "She thinks she's ready," Marianne said, her gaze sliding over me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But you never really know, do you?" I looked down at my lap, smoothing my dress. My own mother squeezed my hand under the table, a small, secret comfort. The gifts started, as they always do, tiny onesies, books about sleep schedules, a gift card for a rainy day. My friend Sarah joked about sleep now while you can, and laughter circled the room. Marianne waited until the very last present, an elaborate pink box with her name written in tight cursive, before stepping forward. "I hope you like it," she said, her voice syrupy. "It's a family tradition." I opened the box to find a delicate gold bracelet, clearly antique, but as I lifted it, a note fluttered to the floor. Marianne didn't wait for me to read it. She turned to the room, smiling. "That bracelet belonged to my husband's mother. We don't give it to just anyone." Her eyes found mine, and in that moment, everything went silent. "I just hope it goes to someone who's here for the right reasons. These days, you can't be too careful. Some girls come along for the house, the cars, and the credit cards." The words slid out, slick and rehearsed. Laughter faltered. I felt my face flush, hot and prickly, like I'd stepped into a spotlight. My best friend looked away. Even my mother's hand tensed in mine. I tried to swallow the shame, tried to remind myself that Marianne liked to make scenes. But this was different. This was her, announcing to everyone that I was a gold digger, without saying the words directly, but making sure everyone connected the dots. Someone coughed. The air in the room changed, heavy and sharp. For a second, I saw myself from above, sitting in a circle of folding chairs, surrounded by pastel streamers, while 30 women wondered what I'd do. Do you say something? Do you smile and pretend she's just being old-fashioned? Or do you finally stand up for yourself, even if it means breaking the unspoken rule of never causing a scene at your own baby shower? That's when I realized something. Marianne didn't want peace. She wanted a reaction. She needed everyone to see that she was still the queen bee, that her approval was a prize you had to earn, and I, apparently, hadn't. The rest of the shower played out in a blur. I opened a few more gifts, pasted on a smile, and nodded at the right moments. I don't even remember what I said to most of the guests. The only thing I remember is the way Marianne's eyes followed me around the room, waiting for me to crumble. After the last guest left, my mother offered to help clean up. I told her to go home, that I needed a minute to myself. She squeezed my shoulder and gave me a look, half worry, half apology. She didn't say it, but I knew she was thinking about her own mother-in-law and the years she'd spent biting her tongue. When I finally sat down, the house felt bigger than usual. Empty plates, abandoned glasses, the faint smell of frosting in the air. I picked up the bracelet, still in its box, and read the note Mary Ann had left. It said, "For the woman who proves she belongs." My breath caught. I closed the box, set it aside, and let the silence wash over me. There's a point where humiliation turns into clarity. I realized that no matter how hard I tried, Mary Ann would never see me as enough. Not rich enough, not polite enough, not obedient enough. I wonder how many other women had sat in rooms like this, trying to smile while someone else cut them down with a single sentence. Daniel came home later, carrying grocery bags and an awkward smile. He asked how it went. I told him, "Fine," because that's what you say when you're too tired to explain. But he knew. He always knew when I was holding something back. He hugged me, long and tight, and whispered, "She doesn't get to decide who you are." But I could tell he was torn. Family loyalty runs deep, and Mary Ann had always held the reins. Even Daniel, as much as he loved me, was careful not to make her mad. That night, I lay awake, replaying the afternoon. The sound of laughter, the weight of that box, the sting of being called something ugly in a room full of people who were supposed to celebrate you. I felt small, like a guest in my own life. But under the humiliation, a new feeling started to bloom. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was resolve. Quiet, steady, unbreakable. If Mary Ann wanted to test me, she'd finally see who I was. And as I drifted off to sleep, I wondered what would happen if I stopped trying to win her approval and started reclaiming my own story. If you've ever lived with someone who doesn't want you to belong, you learn to listen for things no one else hears. It's in the way Mary Ann would pause in a doorway, eyes skimming the room, making sure you noticed her before she spoke. It was always a suggestion. Maybe we should use the good dishes tonight. Or, have you ever tried folding towels like this? Little reminders that her way was the only way worth considering. After the baby shower, something shifted in how I moved through my own house. I caught myself waiting for her approval in small things, how I arranged the living room pillows, how I planned meals, even how I thanked her for bringing over yet another casserole that tasted like obligation. The days blurred into a quiet pattern. Daniel left early for work. I answered emails from my home office, and Mary Ann found reasons to drop by. She'd bring groceries, always the expensive brands I never bought, or bags of hand-me-downs for the baby, which she placed on the kitchen counter like offerings at an altar. "I know you're on a budget," she'd say with a smile, "so I figured this might help." I'd learned by now that refusing a gift was its own crime. I'd also learned that gratitude, when expected like a ritual, turns sour in your mouth. Still, I thanked her. Always. It was easier to perform gratitude than to argue about boundaries. Daniel noticed my mood. He'd catch me staring out the window after Mary Ann left, my hands still and quiet in my lap. "You okay?" he'd ask, brow furrowed with a guilt he'd never put into words. "Just tired," I'd say, because that was the simplest truth I had. Tired of being tested. Tired of wondering how many more hoops I'd have to jump through to be good enough. We stopped hosting Friday dinners with friends. Mary Ann always found a reason to swing by, arriving just as the doorbell rang. She'd join us in the kitchen, never asking, only observing. If laughter erupted from the living room, she'd look up from her phone and say, "It's so nice to see the house full of people for once," as if I'd been living in silence before she arrived. Even small things became battlegrounds. One afternoon, I heard her on the phone with a neighbor, her voice low but urgent. "I just worry she's in over her head." Daniel's always been generous. He deserves someone who understands what it means to be a family. The window was open. The words slipped in like a cold draft. The baby's nursery became my sanctuary. I'd spend hours folding tiny clothes, arranging books on shelves, hanging them mobile above the crib. Sometimes I'd sit in the rocking chair, hands on my belly, listening to the hum of the house. The quiet was safe, but it was also lonely. Friends started pulling away, unsure how to navigate the tension. My mom called every night, asking if I was eating enough, if Daniel was helping, if I needed her to come stay. I told her I was fine. She knew I was lying, but she let me have my dignity. Daniel tried to play peacemaker. "She just wants to be involved," he said one night as we folded laundry. "She's intense, I know, but it's how she shows love." I looked at him, the man I'd chosen, and wondered if love should ever feel like walking on eggshells. The real cracks began to show after a phone call with our realtor. Daniel and I had been planning to move something bigger, maybe closer to his job. We wanted a place where our child could grow up without feeling the weight of someone else's history pressing in from every room. Marian found out, of course. She confronted me in the kitchen, her voice sharp enough to slice bread. "So you're taking my son and grandchild away from me now? Is that your plan?" Her eyes glittered with something darker than hurt. "Or do you just want a bigger house on Daniel's dime?" I froze. The words hung between us, sticky and sour. For a moment, I saw the younger version of myself, the girl who wanted everyone to like her, who'd apologize for things that weren't her fault just to keep the peace. That girl was still inside me, but she was getting harder to find. I set the kettle down. "We're looking for what's best for our family. You're always welcome here. But this is our decision." Marianne stepped closer, lowering her voice. "If you think you can take him away from me, you're mistaken. You may have married him, but you don't know what it means to be a real family. You just showed up with your pretty smile and your sob story. I see through all that." It was the first time she'd spoken the accusation out loud. Gold digger. Interloper. Outsider. I didn't respond. I just turned away and finished making tea, hands trembling so hard the cups clinked on the saucers. That night, Daniel found me sitting in the dark. Did something happen? I shook my head. Silence felt safer than the truth. He reached for me anyway, pulling me close, but I could feel the weight in his arms, the heaviness of choosing between his mother and his wife. Days passed, then weeks. The baby grew. My body ached in new places, and sleep came in short, anxious bursts. Marianne's visit slowed, but when she did appear, her presence was sharper, more brittle. She'd linger by the front door, scanning the room as if cataloging what might be missing when she returned. One morning, an envelope slid through our mail slot. No return address, just my name in Marianne's careful script. Inside was a newspaper clipping about a woman who'd schemed her way into a wealthy family, only to leave with half the assets after a messy divorce. Beneath it, a handwritten note. Just a reminder, marriage isn't a free ride. I stared at the note until the words blurred. Then I set it on the table, took a deep breath, and texted Daniel, "Can you come home for lunch?" When he arrived, I showed him the clipping. He read it, silent, then closed his eyes. "I'll talk to her," he said. But there was no anger in his voice, only resignation. That was the moment I realized Daniel was as trapped as I was, caught between loyalty and love, afraid of the fallout if he chose a side. For the first time, I felt a flicker of compassion for him. It didn't erase the pain, but it made me see the battle wasn't just mine to fight. The days grew colder. The baby's due date crept closer. The house, once filled with hopeful plans, felt smaller, tighter, as if Marianne's shadow was pressing in from every corner. But I was changing too. I found myself letting go of small battles, stopped worrying if the towels were folded her way, stopped caring if the casserole went uneaten. I was tired of living my life for someone else's approval. Still, at night I wondered, how much more could I take before something inside me finally snapped? The world outside turned silver with frost, and inside our house the air felt even colder. By December, I had mastered the art of appearing calm, smiling at Daniel's attempts at optimism, brushing off my mother's concerned texts, and pretending that Marianne's silence was a kind of peace. But it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that gathers before a storm. Christmas came, with its relentless cheer. Daniel and I hosted dinner, just the three of us this year. It was his idea, hoping it might thaw whatever was frozen between his mother and me. Marianne arrived in a cloud of designer perfume, bearing a gift bag the size of a small suitcase and a brittle, perfect smile. Dinner passed in a blur of roast chicken and forced conversation. Every time Daniel left the room, Marianne's eyes darted to my stomach, then to the kitchen cabinets, as if counting the plates, the glasses, the things that now belonged to me by marriage. She kept her comments measured, but every compliment felt like a test. The gravy turned out surprisingly well, or, that's a lovely sweater. Daniel must have bought it. When dessert came, Marianne placed her fork down, laced her fingers, and leaned forward.
So,
Any updates on the house search? Daniel started to answer, but I cut in before he could cover for us. We're putting things on hold until after the baby, I said. Marianne's lips curled. Smart. Wouldn't want to rush into anything, especially with so much at stake. Daniel glanced between us, the tension so thick you could almost taste it. I excused myself, standing at the window, watching snowflakes swirl in the streetlight. Behind me, I heard Daniel try to steer the conversation back to safe ground. It was useless. Marianne thrived on discomfort, especially mine. After she left, I sat on the edge of our bed, exhausted. Daniel rubbed my back in slow, tired circles. I'm sorry, he whispered. I wish things were easier. I nodded, but the words felt empty. What I wanted wasn't easy. I just wanted respect. A week later, Marianne's campaign went public. I found out when a neighbor dropped by with a plate of cookies and a soft, sympathetic look. Heard you're having a rough time, she said quietly. I can't imagine how hard it must be, dealing with all those rumors. My chest tightened. What rumors? She hesitated, then said, that you only married Daniel for his money. That you're planning to leave once the baby's born. She looked so genuinely sorry that I felt embarrassed, as if I'd done something wrong just by existing. I shut the door behind her and slumped to the floor, the plate of cookies untouched beside me. I'd known Marianne was relentless, but this was different. This was her drawing lines in the sand, daring me to cross. That night, I confronted Daniel. She's telling people I'm using you, I said, my voice trembling with anger. People we barely know are treating me like a villain in my own home. He ran his hands through his hair, defeated. She won't stop unless I tell her to. Then tell her, I said, the word sharper than I meant. He nodded, but I saw the fear in his eyes, the fear of what it would cost to finally stand up to her. The next day, Marianne arrived unannounced. She breezed in with her usual authority, ignoring the tension that lingered like perfume. I was in the nursery, folding baby blankets, when she appeared in the doorway. I just want what's best for my son, she said, her voice almost gentle. You can't blame a mother for worrying. I know girls like you, pretty, clever, always looking for a way out. I looked up, letting the words settle. Is that really what you think? She hesitated, then smiled a slow, knowing smile. You're not the first, and you won't be the last. The silence stretched between us, unbroken. I realized then that nothing I said would change her mind. Marianne needed me to be the villain because the alternative, that her son loved me for me, was too threatening. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, listening to Daniel's steady breathing, replaying every moment of humiliation, every whispered rumor, every little theft of dignity. And suddenly I was done. Not angry, not vengeful, just finished. The next morning, I called my lawyer. It was a conversation I'd hoped never to have, but as soon as I explained the situation, she was calm and direct. You have a prenup. You have proof of harassment. And you're the one who's been building this home. Her words settled something inside me. For the first time in months, I felt like I had a foothold. I drafted an email to Marianne.
Short.
Formal. I attached a PDF of the prenup, highlighting the sections that outlined financial boundaries and consequences for interference in our marriage. I also attached a scanned copy of an eviction notice, one Daniel and I had agreed upon, just in case things ever went too far. It was a safeguard, meant to protect our future, but now it was a message. Enough. I stared at the email before sending it, feeling a weight lift from my chest. It wasn't revenge, not really. It was self-respect. It was a line drawn in ink instead of sand. I didn't wait for her reply. Later that day, I found Daniel in the kitchen. He was pouring coffee, eyes tired but softer than I'd seen in months. "Did you do it?" he asked. I nodded. "She'll understand. Or she won't. But I'm done being afraid of her." He set the mug down and pulled me into a hug, longer this time. "I should have done more," he said quietly. "We both did what we could," I whispered. That night, as the wind rattled the windows and our house creaked with the memory of every argument, I slept deeply for the first time in ages. When morning came, there were no new texts, no phone calls, no drama. Just silence, peaceful, heavy, and full of possibility. But even then, I knew this was just the start. Marianne wasn't the kind of woman to disappear quietly. The question was, what would she do next? Days passed with no word from Marianne. The quiet was not victory or defeat. It was the sound of someone recalibrating, of a force of nature trying to decide which direction to blow next. Daniel and I moved through our routines carefully, both bracing for impact. We knew it would not last. Her words settled something inside me. For the first time in months, I felt like I had a foothold. I drafted an email to Marianne. Short. Formal. I attached a PDF of the prenup, highlighting the sections that outlined financial boundaries and consequences for interference in our marriage. I also attached a scanned copy of an eviction notice, one Daniel and I had agreed upon, just in case things ever went too far. It was a safeguard, meant to protect our future, but now it was a message. Enough. I stared at the email before sending it, feeling a weight lift from my chest. It wasn't revenge, not really. It was self-respect. It was a line drawn in ink instead of sand. I didn't wait for her reply. Later that day, I found Daniel in the kitchen. He was pouring coffee, eyes tired but softer than I'd seen in months. "Did you do it?" he asked. I nodded. "She'll understand. Or she won't. But I'm done being afraid of her." He set the mug down and pulled me into a hug, longer this time. "I should have done more," he said quietly. "We both did what we could," I whispered. That night, as the wind rattled the windows and our house creaked with the memory of every argument, I slept deeply for the first time in ages. When morning came, there were no new texts, no phone calls, no drama. Just silence, peaceful, heavy, and full of possibility. But even then, I knew this was just the start. Marianne wasn't the kind of woman to disappear quietly. The question was, what would she do next? Days passed with no word from Marianne. The quiet was not victory or defeat. It was the sound of someone recalibrating, of a force of nature trying to decide which direction to blow next. Daniel and I moved through our routines carefully, both bracing for impact. We knew it would not last. The confrontation finally came, not with a bang but with a perfectly polite knock at our door one gray Saturday morning. Marianne arrived in a powder blue coat, lips set in a line, a folder clutched to her chest like a shield. Daniel tensed at the sight of her, but I met her eyes and gestured for her to come in. For the first time in months, I was not afraid of the storm she carried. She sat at the kitchen table, ignoring the coffee I set down. She opened the folder and pushed a sheet of paper across to me, a letter filled with formal language about concerns regarding the stability of the family unit, and a list of complaints that felt more like old wounds than real grievances. Her handwriting was perfect, each word chosen to wound while still seeming civil. I read it through quietly. When I finished, I folded it, set it aside, and met her gaze. "I'm not going to defend myself anymore, Marianne. I'm done proving I belong in my own home." She blinked, surprised. Daniel's hand found mine under the table. "You're right," he said, voice gentle but steady. "We're a family now. All three of us, soon to be four. And we need you to respect that or step back." The moment was soft, but it was seismic. Marianne looked between us, searching for the cracks she could widen, but there were none left. I saw something shift in her, resentment maybe, or the reluctant recognition that her power here had run out. She stood up, gathering her things. "You know, I just want what's best for Daniel. For the baby." Her words wavered at the edges, the the first sign of real uncertainty I had ever seen in her. "I know you do," I said, and I meant it, even if her love was more barbed than gentle. "But from now on, what's best is space and respect. For all of us." She left without another word. The door closed softly, and the echo felt final. The months that followed were not perfect. Marianne kept her distance. Some days it was polite, other days it felt like a silent protest. But Daniel and I built new rhythms. We painted the nursery, argued over the right crib, laughed over late-night takeout, and planned our daughter's arrival with a hope that felt real for the first time. When the baby came, the world shrank to the small, beautiful things: tiny hands gripping my finger, the sound of her breathing against my chest, Daniel's tears as he held her for the first time. For a while, everything outside that hospital room felt small, distant, unimportant. Marian sent flowers, not a visit. The card was simple: "Welcome to the world, little one." There was no signature, but I recognized the handwriting. I sat with the card in my hands, feeling a sadness for the years wasted on rivalry and suspicion, but also a kind of relief. Sometimes closure is not dramatic. Sometimes it is just a quiet agreement to stop hurting each other. Back home, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. The parties, the whispers, the letters, the battles for space and dignity. I was not proud of every choice I had made, but I was proud of surviving with my sense of self intact. One afternoon, as sunlight poured through the nursery window, I watched my daughter sleep and thought about what it meant to build a home, not just with bricks and walls, but with boundaries and truth. I promised myself that she would never have to earn her place here, that love would never come with a list of conditions. Daniel joined me, slipping an arm around my shoulders. "She's perfect," he whispered. "She's ours," I said. And I knew, finally, that I belonged. Sometimes, justice is soft. It is a refusal to bend, a quiet reclaiming of what was always yours. It is knowing that you can survive even the harshest words, and that the best revenge is living honestly, lovingly, on your own terms. As the months rolled on, Marianne's presence faded into the background. The wounds she left did not disappear, but they stopped bleeding. In their place grew something steadier: quiet strength, forgiveness, and the knowledge that family, when built right, does not require anyone's permission but your own. And sometimes, when the house is quiet and the world feels safe, I think back to that baby shower, that humiliating moment, and I smile. Because what came after still does not sit right with me, but it does not haunt me, either. Not anymore.